It was supposed to be a clash of giants, but no one, not even the masterminds who orchestrated it, fully grasped how catastrophic it would become. On one side stood Nazi Germany, riding high after conquering most of Europe, driven by ideology, arrogance, and Adolf Hitler's obsessive hunger for expansion. On the other, the vast and brutal empire of the Soviet Union, ruled by Joseph Stalin, a man just as ruthless, paranoid, and calculating. Their war, the German-Soviet War, better known as the Eastern Front of World War II, became the largest and deadliest conflict in human history, responsible for over 30 million deaths, the destruction of entire cities, and a scar on civilization that never fully healed. The story begins in 1939, when Germany and the Soviet Union shocked the world by signing the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression treaty that secretly carved up Eastern Europe between them. Poland was divided like a pie. The West was stunned. Two ideologically opposed regimes, fascists and communists, suddenly cooperating. It was temporary. Both sides knew this agreement was a ticking time bomb. Hitler never planned to honor it, Stalin knew it, and both men were preparing for a collision course so vast it would shake the world. That collision began on June 22, 1941. Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in world history. Over 3 million German troops, 3,000 tanks, and 2,500 aircraft surged across the Soviet border stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. The Germans expected a swift victory, just like in France. They believed the Soviet army was weak, disorganized, and demoralized after Stalin's brutal purges. And at first, they were right. The Soviets were completely caught off guard. Planes were destroyed on the ground. Commanders hesitated, terrified of acting without Stalin's orders. Cities like Minsk, Kiev, and Smolensk fell with terrifying speed. Hundreds of thousands of Soviet troops were encircled and captured. Nazi propaganda declared the Red Army broken. But what Hitler didn't realize was that Soviet collapse wasn't the same as Soviet defeat. Stalin ordered a brutal scorched earth policy, villages burned, crops destroyed, factories dismantled and sent east. The Red Army, though battered, didn't quit. It bled, it regrouped, and it learned. By the time the Germans reached the outskirts of Moscow in December 1941, they were exhausted, freezing, and stretched thin. Then, in an incredible twist, the Soviets counterattacked. Fresh Siberian troops, battle-hardened from winter warfare, pushed the Germans back from Moscow in the dead of winter. Hitler's dream of a quick victory crumbled into a frozen nightmare. Yet the bloodiest chapter was still to come. In the summer of 1942, Hitler made another gamble. He shifted focus to the south, targeting the oil fields of the Caucasus and the industrial city of Stalingrad. It was a city that bore Stalin's name. Taking it would be symbolic, and destroying it would break Soviet morale. The Battle of Stalingrad became the turning point of the entire war. The Germans poured everything into it: planes, tanks, elite divisions. The Soviets responded with absolute ferocity: house-to-house combat, snipers on every rooftop. The city became a graveyard. Every block was contested, every ruin soaked in blood. But then came the Soviet trap. In November 1942, the Red Army launched Operation Uranus, a massive encirclement maneuver. They didn't attack the Germans head-on. Instead, they struck the weaker Romanian and Hungarian flanks guarding the city. Within days, over 300,000 Axis troops were trapped inside Stalingrad, cut off from supplies, freezing in winter, and slowly starving. Hitler ordered them to hold their ground. No retreat, but there would be no relief. In February 1943, after months of agony, Field Marshal Paulus surrendered. It was the first time a German field marshal had ever surrendered in history. Over 90,000 soldiers were captured. Only around 5,000 ever made it home. It was a devastating blow to Nazi prestige. From that moment on, the tide turned. The Soviet Union, once written off as backwards and broken, became a war machine. Factories in the Ural Mountains produced thousands of tanks, aircraft, and artillery. Entire cities were rebuilt. Millions of new troops were drafted. and Stalin's generals, Zhukov, Rokossovsky, Konev, began pushing west. The Germans, now fighting on multiple fronts and, drained by years of total war, began to retreat, slowly, bloodily, desperately. In 1943, the two giants clashed again at Kursk, which was the largest tank battle in history. Over 6,000 tanks, 2 million soldiers, and thousands of aircraft collided. Hitler wanted to regain the initiative. He failed. The Red Army stood firm and then advanced. From that point on, it was a relentless Soviet march toward Berlin. Every city taken brought vengeance, some justified, some horrific. The Germans had committed countless atrocities during their invasion: mass executions, the starvation of civilians, the siege of Leningrad, and the mechanized murder of Jews, Poles, and Slavs. Now the Soviets returned the cruelty tenfold. Civilians suffered, cities burned, and war crimes followed war crimes. By 1944, Germany was collapsing. The Red Army swept through Ukraine, Belarus, Poland, and the Baltics. Resistance was fierce, but no longer enough. The Germans were retreating on all fronts. In January 1945, the Soviets launched their final offensive, the target Berlin. It was the heart of Nazi power, and they would rip it out, no matter the cost. The Battle of Berlin was apocalyptic. Soviet artillery pounded the city day and night, buildings turned to rubble. German soldiers, old men, and teenagers fought in hopeless desperation. Hitler, hiding in his bunker, refused to flee. On April 30th, 1945, as Soviet troops closed in, Hitler shot himself, and his dream of a 1,000-year Reich died with him. On May 8th, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war between Germany and the Soviet Union had lasted 4 years, but its impact still haunts the world today. It caused over 30 million deaths, the vast majority civilians. Entire cities were erased, families vanished, and out of its ashes the world was divided again, this time between East and West, beginning the Cold War that would dominate the next half-century. Germany was split. The Soviet Union emerged as a superpower, but at an immense human cost. The scars left behind, on bodies, on borders, on history, were permanent. The war between Germany and the Soviet Union wasn't just the bloodiest chapter of World War II, it was a war within a war, a brutal, ideologically driven struggle between fascism and communism, between totalitarian titans, between two leaders who saw compromise as weakness. It defined what war could become in the modern age, mechanized, industrial, genocidal. And it reminded the world that sometimes the greatest threat to humanity is not one side or the other, but the very idea that domination is worth any cost. If this shocked you, imagine how many more are hidden in history's shadows. Subscribe now for real, untold stories of war, betrayal, and survival, narratives that textbooks ignore but the world must never forget.